Community station.
Right. Welcome to Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willies, your host. How are all my peeps doing this morning? Good morning, folks. Are you driving to work? Are you just waking up? Are you getting that first cup of coffee? Are you getting that first una taza de té? That first cup of tea? Well, anyhow, folks, we have a great program for you as usual. How is everybody doing? How are my people doing out there in the control room? El Senor Howard Reynolds and Jack Van Beber, how are you doing?
Well, the control room is present, tin cans and string accounted for, and Jack Van Beber is here.
All right, Jack Van Beber is in the house. What is the word of the morning, Senor Jack Van Beber?
Good morning, Egberto. Yes, I have a little question for the people to ponder, and it's why?
Uh-oh.
Okay, why are the American people? Oh, not why, but are the American people spoiled by materialism that they won't even rock the boat a little to protest against the violent, predatory nature of our government, business, law, and finance? Are
What?
which they are using against the people?
I love it.
That's quite a preponderance there, Jack.
Yes, it is quite a
And it's
preponderance.
6:01 in the morning. I'm not sure I want to preponder right now.
Well, I thought that up
Oh, did you? Okay.
when I
Well,
was awake.
Well,
Okay.
you know what, Jack? I love the question. I love the question, and you know what? It's like you have a sixth sense, or I don't know, because we're gonna touch on that kinda. You know what I mean, Jack?
Yeah, I was thinking about that this morning when I was reading your articles for today.
Yeah, yeah, we're gonna hit that up. We are gonna hit that up really nice. You know, let me tell you guys something. And first of all, folks, let me tell you, of course, there are many ways for you to get to the program. Don't forget 90.1 FM. Dial it. I imagine those of you that are listening in the car, that's how you're doing it right now. But there are many other ways to do it. You can get the TuneIn application for your telephone and download the Android version or Apple version from the Android and Apple Store respectively. You can also listen to it from our website, kpft.org, kpft.org. Likewise, you can watch us now. You can watch the program live, including the videos that we put out, etc., at KPFT, or rather at facebook.com/KPFT Houston, facebook.com/KPFT Houston. And of course, on YouTube, you can watch it as well, live or otherwise, politicsdoneright.tv. Politicsdoneright.tv. We have a great show for you today. Look, you know, yesterday was walking downstairs, or maybe it was the day before. I can't remember exactly. Yesterday, the day before. Actually, it was yesterday. My wife was watching TV, and I think she had it on CBS. And there was this program. One of the segments that they did was on electric cars. And when they did this segment on electric cars, the Chiron below said electric cars could increase the danger of collisions because of an electric car, which because of those batteries are heavier than a lot of other cars on the road. If it hits another car, of course, the forces of physics work. It's heavier. You get a more substantive hit. If two cars that normally would have, let's say if two sedans hit, the electric car is a bit heavier, so you get a more impactful crash. And my wife was like, "Did you know that?" And I'm like, well, if anything heavier, if something is heavier, there's more mass. If a heavier mass is moving at the same speed than a lighter mass, yes, it's more energy that's dissipated in an organized manner. Yeah. And then she says, "Oh, wow." And the kind of feeling that hit her, she's not an engineer, but the kind of feeling that hit her was like, "Oh, so there's an issue with electric cars." Then I looked and I said, "Look, let me tell you. There are electric cars, but then there are 18-wheelers, and then if you're in Texas, there are a lot of folks who drive their Ford 350s and Ford 250s, and there are a lot of big cars a lot of expeditions, a lot of big cars here in Texas. So I mean, getting hit by a bigger car isn't a new thing, or getting hit by a heavy car or heavy device or heavy thing isn't a big thing. I said, you know where these studies come from, right? And she says, what do you mean? And I said, look, companies that want to keep certain things their way, they're going to put out stories in there and make it a big story so that it'll modify your thinking like it just did to you. You started to think, normally people think electric cars, efficiency. Electric cars, no pollution. Electric cars, no oxides. I said, think about this. All right, every day, a car that does not crash, a car that's driving on the road, which is the vast majority, 99.9999% of cars never get into an accident. They're driving back and forth to work every day. Normal gasoline-driven cars. They are just about doing their thing every day, but they're all emitting nitrous oxide and a lot of other carbon dioxide and a lot of other things. Let's ask this question. For the amount of electric cars that would do more damage than it would in a collision that would have done more damage than that gas car, let's say, all right? How much damage comparatively, based on the saving from throwing oxides and carbon into the air, how much less people will that electric car, which is more massive, cost than that gas car and the millions of gasoline cars that are driven every day? And she's like, oh my God, wow. I never looked at it that way. I just saw the Chiron. I saw the report that says these cars are heavier, and the first thought in my mind was, uh-oh, that's going to be interesting for electric cars. We're going to have more people that get into more, heavier, worse accidents because the car is heavier. But you didn't discount the amount of people's lives that are saved because there's less nitrous oxide, less of all these nitrous devices and carbon, and there are other oxides that get created from burning fossil fuel. And so like, oh wow. Why? And by the way, and as I listened to the report as well, I was hoping that the reporter would give that side of the story as he's telling this report that evidently, I don't know which organization wrote it, but every time you see these types of programs, these narratives on TV that seems to be newsworthy, science-based or whatever, you always have to ask for that comprehensive story, which this report didn't give. And she's like, wow, I never thought about it that way. Why did I start with that story, which has nothing to do on the surface with the topics we're covering today? To let you know that whenever you are getting news information, always ask two questions. Who paid and who is given this report? And also, what did this report neglect to inform me of? The entire picture. Because there are so many forces out there that are attempting to mislead you based on giving you partial information. And information can be true. The information they give you can be true, but because the information comes without context, it makes you or could lead you into making bad decisions. And that is so important. I've had people talk about, well, renewable energies uses materials that when mined, create damage to the environment. True. But again, that damage to that environment occurs one time for that particular vehicle that those components are going into, while a car that's using fossil fuel burns the fossil fuel over and over and over again. I'm trying to say, don't let them mess with your mess with the carnality of humanity, but the brains of humanity. That's what we need to do. Anyway, folks, the title of the story today is Drug Companies Should Not Exist. Second one, GOP intent on screwing with your Social Security. And many other stories. Welcome to the Politics Done Right over the internet. Alistair Waters is in the house. Good morning, Alistair, as well as Eric Hayes in the house. Good morning, Eric Hayes. He says, do you drive an electric or gas car, Egberto? No, I don't, but I want to. But I can't afford it right now. How can you give advice? I can, let's see. A doctor doesn't have to have cancer to give advice on cancer, right? There are kids digging in the materials of the EV. Yes, there are kids doing that. Also, the process of getting the materials in using fossil fuels. I think you made my point. All right, let's go to Johnny before I get to this topic because he called in early. Come on, Johnny, talk to me.
Oh, let me turn my radio down. That was a surprise. My only question about battery-operated vehicles is this. You know how they talk about electromagnetic fields and cell phones and brain tumors? Did they think about any kind of electromagnetic fields coming out of these batteries and or the electric motors? So is there lead shielding or some kind of shielding between us in the cab and these fields created by these electric battery-operated vehicles?
My gut feeling is that depending on the steel around, you will get some you will get some protection. And remember, these cars don't operate at high voltages, so there's not a large EMF being output. If you take a look at the problems that we talk about, are those high 300,000 volt transfer cables that we have in the sky. That sort of stuff create problems. But again, this is low voltage DC current, which my gut feeling, and by the way, notice I just said my gut feeling because I haven't done any experiments, etc., but it's comparatively low voltage, which isn't going to be, if you put it this way, if you put an antenna around your car, an electric car, you don't get a whole lot of stuff happening. So, my gut feeling is that it wouldn't be anything severe. But again, I always say when we compare it to chemicals that are going to be embedded in one's lungs as you breathe, I think it's something that it's far removed. My gut feeling is that the cell phone is likely going to emit more given the frequency at which it works. Anything else, Brother Johnny?
The amperage also is not an issue?
The amperage is generally not an issue because, again, it isn't something that's being transferred electromagnetically through the air, right? When you're talking about 300,000 volts transitioning electricity, there is EMF there and other. You do actually get energy transferred through the air, right? And it's because higher voltages and frequencies can be transmitted, but when it comes to low frequency, etc., it's almost like, think about when you hear a low frequency sound or something like that. So, my gut feeling, and I am saying it's gut feeling just based on my initial reaction from what I know from science, from what I know from electricity, that wouldn't be the case.
Okay, final question that has to do, you just alluded to it. You talked about breathing in particle matter, and I'm thinking about asbestos-lined brakes.
Right.
Cars that are electric, don't they rely on conventional braking, or
the
motor itself that's the only braking system?
Actually, electric cars use an interesting way of braking, right? Because you want, first of all, when you brake a car, to turn that motion that you're going, that motion that you have, kinetic energy, to change it, to stop that car, you have to get rid of that kinetic energy. And the asbestos in the pads, again, there because it can resist high temperature. All it is to convert that mechanical energy into heat. That's what pads normally do. In electric cars, there is a reverse accumulation of energy so that you can get more battery use. And that is when you're braking the car, it uses electromagnetism to slow the car down. Now, I don't know if it also partial. I have to go look at a brake system in an electric car, but I know a large part of it is to recover the energy back into the brakes whenever you're braking the car.
Okay, Alberto, you're a jack of all trades.
Not really. I just try to keep up with what we're doing, my brother. Anyways, let's thank you, Johnny. Call back if something else tickles your fancy, because we have some interesting subjects to cover right now, brother. All right.
Yes, you do. Adios.
All right. Title of the title of the program today: Drug companies should not exist. GOP intent on screwing with your Social Security. And which one am I gonna start with? Of course, I'm going to start with the one that says drug companies should not exist, because I ran up on a story written by, I love the way the amount of research he put into this story, by Richard Escow. I think he's also an opinion writer at the New York Times, if I recall correctly. And his title was, "Why should drug corporations like Merck and Eli Lilly even exist?" I agree with you, Mr. Eskew. They shouldn't exist. They're nothing but parasites. What do I mean by that? For those, from all the advertising that these companies make, they're going to tell Americans how important they are because of the way our economic system works. They create great drugs, and all these great drugs they create makes us more healthy. And not only does it make us more healthy, but it makes the United States a bastion of health care. And that's why the kings and queens around the world come to get service here at the Houston Medical Center, at the Mayo Clinic, and at all these great places of health that we have, which for all practical purposes is the truth. America, as I've heard Brother Howard say, Brother Howard, you used a phrase that I wanted to mimic that I always forget. Something about, we have the best something you can buy.
Oh, yeah, that. We have the best government and justice money can buy, and the best health care you can afford.
There you go. There you go. And that statement from Howard is profound. It's profound. He is absolutely so right, because you know what? We have great health care. And yes, let's talk about the great health care that money can buy. But most Americans are not going to get all those great discoveries that they paid for. I want to start out by reading pieces of his article. It says, "How do big pharma executives have the nerve to show their faces in public?" I want to stop there because I want to remind you of two of the stories that we covered earlier this week. Welcome aboard, Melanie Keelan. Welcome aboard. And it goes this way. Earlier, we spoke about inflation, who really causes it. And we also spoke about the Fed's raising interest rates, penalizing the working class for a problem, inflation, not created by the working class, but business. And here we have the story that I'm covering today about drug companies. They're the ones creating large portions of the inflation rate as well, because they're taking your money. All right? And I make the case here today. So again, for those who are just tuning in, I saw another batch just come in. For those who are just tuning in, title of the show again is Drug Companies Should Not Exist. And I'm going to read this story by Mr. Eskew, a part of the story by Mr. Eskew, and it goes this way. Why should drug companies like Merck and Eli Lilly even exist? How do big pharma executives have the nerve to show their faces in public, much less threaten to sue the government that has enriched them with the treasure and lives of the American public? Government-funded discoveries have given drug companies like Merck and Eli Lilly much, if not most, of their patented technology. The government lax attitude toward drug company predation and criminality has made them even richer. I hope you get that, Because the drug companies are out there telling you that they've discovered something. They are making your lives better. They are making you healthier. It's a lie. Mostly every single drug created was done at a university or with a government grant. And what does that mean? It means that you, everybody who's listening to my voice right now and going to work every day, as you sit down many a times in your car, listening to the news and blaming your fellow brother and sister and blaming the other for the problems you are having in your life, for the health care you can't get, etc. Do remember where the problems lie, with these corporate parasites. So again, what do? You are paying taxes every day, and the taxes you pay are going to university to create great universities. And in those great universities, there are great scientists. And those great American scientists and scientists from all over the world, they're out there creating and researching new drugs. They're creating how the body responds to these things. And you know what? They experiment and experiment and experiment. And they find out, this chemical reaction will work. The body actually absorbs things this way. They discover those things. And as they're doing it, and their papers they write, and corporate executives read these papers. You know, they subscribe to these things. They read these papers, right? And they say, guess what? The University of XYZ is doing this. Maybe we should talk about buying it. Then they go out there and they go to the university and they talk to the professor and they decide they're going to give some money to the university to name a building after a professor or name a building after something, in which case the patent gets transferred to that company. They may even invest a little bit of money to further the research on something that will likely work. Remember what I've said in several other programs. Corporations do not take risks. They like to say we make big profits because we take risks. Corporations are in business to minimize risk. It's completely the opposite of what they tell you the reason for profit is. We accept profit because, if you do great, you make a profit. If you don't do well, you don't make a profit. But corporations today are risk averse. You doubt me? They go ahead and they make sure that something works first. Even your insurance company. Your insurance company says, I'm risk averse. I need to make sure you're not sick. Then I insure you. If you're sick, forget it. You better go to the government. But if you want insurance, you better be healthy. And then if you start billing the insurance company, we try not to pay you. It's risk averse. They don't take risks. They're in business to make money for their shareholders and their executives. All right. Continuing with the article. A recent staff report from Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pension, it's called HELP, Committee, and its chair, Senator Bernie Sanders, found that the average price of treatments over the past 20 years that the NIH scientists help invent is $111,000. Think about that again. I repeat, the average cost of any particular treatment invented over the last 20 years, and by the way, and who invented it again? We the people, cost $111,000. Where do you think most of that money go to? Do you think it goes into research and development? Do you think it goes anywhere there? No! That money is a transfer of wealth from you into the pockets of Merck, into the pockets of Eli Lilly, and all these other companies, right? But we take it. You know why we take it? Because most of us don't know the truth. Most of us don't know that most of the money you pay for drugs go into the pockets of somebody else, even after you have paid for the development of that drug by the taxes you pay that go into universities and grants. And yet, at the first sign that the government might ask for something in return, these corporations bite the hand that feed them. Unfortunately, it's the public who bleeds. That is from the article. How rich is Merck? Its net income, not gross income, not gross sales. Its net income was $19 billion last year, an increase of what? 40% over the previous year. All right, let's stop there. I'm going to stop reading. I'm going to explain that. You have just gotten a net income of $19 billion. It's 40% over what it was the year before. What is that called? Inflation to the people. Profits for them, inflation for the people. If their amount of profit went up by 40% and they didn't give 40% more services and products, that means that is inflation. Who creates inflation again? I want us to think logically, folks. I don't want us to just listen to the news you hear on TV. If a company doesn't give more products and services, but their profits increase by 40%, that determines productivity increases and likely inflation. And what have we had over the last several years now? A large increase in inflation that goes correspondingly with a large increase in profits for corporations who are not doing any more services and products for you. The reason I break down and try to tell you this is I want you always to, with a grain of salt when you're watching the news, to really listen to your backstory. Because this is calculated parasitic ripoff. Continuing. The CEO of the company received $18,469,835 in total compensation. One person that year. On average, Merck's senior executives received more than $10 million each in 2022. I repeat, executives at Merck, the average executive at Merck made $10 million or more in 2022. Whose money is that? Did they invent anything? Did they create anything? Did they research anything? No, they're executives sitting down at a desk with a piece of paper, a pen, a computer, an Excel spreadsheet. How comes there isn't a safe, a peaceful revolt against what we have allowed these people to do? You know, Johnny, several calls ago, said, Egberto, I know this. What do we do? What do we do? And I wrote a book called How to Talk to Your Right-Wing relatives, friends, and neighbors, and another one called How to Make America Utopia. And in these books, what I always try to do is say, you know what, brothers and sisters, we have people on the radio, we have people writing books complaining and complaining and complaining and complaining. And nobody's telling you what to do. Well, I'm telling you what we can do. What we can do occurs every 2 years. But what we all together have to do is inform each other with the truth. Right? And informing with the truth also then says, go ahead when you go to that ballot box and vote for the people who are telling the truth and who are willing to do something with what's occurring that hurts us all. The fact that hundreds of executives around at all these drug companies all get millions of dollars every year for writing a few essays and for doing a few Excel spreadsheets, etc., should have you so revoltingly mad. You shouldn't be mad at those things they're telling you to be mad about. Immigration? Are you kidding me? You shouldn't be mad about immigration. You should be saying, immigrants, come on over. There's so much work we have to do would actually reduce the cost of a lot of what we do. You know? The people that we should be mad at are the ones that are making us look the other way as they pick our pockets. $10 million each in 2022. More than half of that was awarded in the form of in the form of shares, giving each of Merck's leaders a multi-million-dollar incentive to maximize profits regardless of the human cost. And isn't that what we're seeing right now? Isn't that what we are seeing right now? And yet, these senior executives don't seem embarrassed. You know, people on welfare, right? You're on food stamps. You're on whatever, they want you to feel, like embarrassed, You're on the dole. You're getting something you didn't work for. You're on food stamps, man. You're on SSI, man. You're getting something you don't deserve, man. Well, you should feel embarrassed. But that corporate executive who's getting $10 million, somebody on food stamps probably max out likely of a few, maybe $2,000 or $3,000 a year in what they get probably from the government, being on the dole, if you want to call it that or whatever. That's what they get, maybe $3,000 or so. That corporate executives for sitting down in that office doing nothing gets $10 million. Who should be embarrassed? The welfare recipient? Or that executive who's getting $10 million for inventing nothing, for creating nothing, for solving no problem, other than winning the lottery to be chosen to be an executive in that company? We have learned how to look down at certain people and how to look up at others. That person that makes $10 million that you would think one would look up to didn't deserve it. That person that makes $3,000 off of their food stamps, who go out there and spend that food stamp money, all of that food stamp money on food, they are creating more economic activity by spending that food stamp money than that guy at Eli Lilly comparatively for having worked and done nothing. And I'm not exaggerating here, people. We have been taught to look down on some who life necessarily have not been kind to, who probably's effective worth to society is greater than that executive. But we've learned how to demean the poor. We've learned how to demean those people who, for the job that they do, don't make as much as they're worth. It's amazing how they have reframed our minds from birth. It's an indoctrination that is hard to get around. It's an indoctrination that we have to figure out how to get around so that we can start doing what's right for us all. Okay. And as this article was being written, this from our brother Isq, the head of Eli Lilly exhibited a similar pathology detachment from human need. CEO David Ricks threatened to withhold medicine from seniors and disabled people on Medicare unless his demands were met. They're suing the United States, Brother Biden passed the Inflation Reduction Act. And like I mentioned a few sessions ago, a few radio shows ago, they're suing the government because the government is saying $35 for insulin, no more. $35 for insulin for stuff on Medicare. They called it an extortion by the government. The government is extorting the drug company for telling the drug companies, you cannot extort the American people. And now they're suing. They are suing the government for working for the people. Again, for a drug that is out of real patent, for a drug that you, the people with your tax dollars, developed, created with your tax dollars over 100 years ago, and they're suing. They want your sympathy. They want your pity. They want your pity, people. And they think they can go into a court of law. Now, I imagine they're going to try to get it to be a trial by judge instead of a trial by jury. Because this case just has to be made by a lawyer out there. And the jury is going to say, oh, no, not only we're going to charge $35, we're going to charge $3 because that's what it really costs. I want you to know that as we speak about these things, there's nothing about wealth envy or us wanting to soak the rich or whatever. The problem is, too often, the rich is not rich because of their service or their worth to society, but because they know how to play the game of capitalism better than anybody else, a game that requires a certain level of dishonesty to play. That's all. This isn't wealth envy. This is humanity loving. Not wealth envy. Humanity loving. Okay? So again, the irony is now they're suing. Adopting the mock empathy of an arm-twisting gangster, Rick said, the president, that refusing drugs to these patients would be really sad for people who rely on government benefits. Oh my God, they rely on government benefits, but because the government only is going to give us $35 or whatever, we got to hold back this drug that we're still making a profit from. Really sad for people who rely on government benefits. But it's consequence that market actors will pursue to restrict their exposure to the law. Folks, please, for anybody listening to me that wants to attempt to find something good about these companies whose modus operandi is exactly what we're describing here. Do you have a brother? Do you have a mother? Do you have a sister? Do you have a daughter? Do you have an auntie who may be sick? I want you to really, really think about this, folks. I really want you to think about what we're saying here and who we actually support. It is so important. The article, I have it linked in my newsletter, politicsandright.com/newsletter, politicsandright.com/newsletter. I'm not going to finish reading the article because it's a very long article. But what I want to point out, and just about every paragraph I have to add my narrative, so I can't read the whole thing. But I want to give you some context here that I'm going to scroll down and give some context. He points out that Merck sold its painkiller called Vioxx for 5 years after initial trials raised the possibility that it caused heart attacks, but they still sold it. It did. By the time Merck pulled Vioxx from the market, it had caused an estimated 88,000 heart attacks among Americans. 38,000 of them died. Remember I said, they don't care. It's just about money. It was a great, very profitable drug. Merck reportedly made a hit list of doctors who disliked Vioxx, which included words like neutralize and discredit. An internal email said of those physicians, we may need to seek them out and destroy them where they live. These are these executives talking. These $10 million executives, doctors who found out that these drugs cause heart attacks in a bunch of people. They were saying we need to create a hit list of them and get rid of them. The $10 million people, they became hitmen. Merck concealed reports of sexual dysfunction and other risks from its anti-baldness drug Propecia, including a long trail of suicide reports. Merck was forced to pay $2.3 billion to settle tax fraud charges. Merck paid $650 million to settle for violating the False Claim Act. Merck paid $1.5 million to settle charges of violating federal environmental laws in the Pennsylvania manufacturing facilities. Its additional environmental violations included the use of methylene chloride and a proven animal carcinogen as solvents in some drugs. Merck paid $688 million to settle claims that it concealed the poor clinical trial outcomes of Vytorin, an anti-cholesterol drug. My point here is let's work together to get things right. Anyway, telephone number 713-526-3746. 5738. Again, the number is 713-526-5738. I'm taking calls right now. If you want to change the subject, if you want to add to the subject, if you want to ask some questions, give us a call. 713-526-5738. Come on, folks. I'd love to hear from you. Una vez más. 713-526-5738. And as usual, before I change subject, I'll always like to ask from the wisdom of Dr. El Señor Howard Reynolds. What's your thoughts, sir?
Oh, the doctor is in, but his patient is going to speak this time.
Okay,
Oh.
I'm the patient.
Let me hear the patient.
This comes down to the flow of information at the top versus the flow of information at the bottom. The executives and the CEOs, get the information first, and I'm a conspiratorial theorist for sure, but there's really only one conspiracy going on, and it's how the corporations work with government to shake down the people for their money. And I see it throughout, business and government happening, this predatory nature, which, my question this morning was, are the people so distracted by their material interests that they can't pay attention to what's going on in the government and business, and how predatory these institutions are becoming, and how they're working against the people, not for profit.
Well, my patient has taken a dose of reality here. So do you want to continue on? I just got a question here. Hey, bro, did you ever see the movie The Fugitive with Harrison Ford?
Of course, I loved it. I love Harrison Ford, man.
It's about the very same thing you've been talking about, medical
Yes.
cover-up.
Yes.
And it was then, in this particular case in the movie, it was a liver drug that was causing damage, and they covered it up and such. And then he wanted to blow the whistle on him, but then they killed his wife and made him a fugitive. So it's actually art imitating life there, because we don't know. Some of these doctors probably have been run out of business, have been dangerously threatened, because they discovered, hey, this drug is bad. This thing's causing problems, and reported it. And then they went, well, we're not going to let you get away with that. That's our $1 million drug. And you were talking about what Merck has paid in fines and stuff. What's the cost of doing business?
Thank you.
They make billions of dollars, and so we have to give $1 billion back. Well, okay. But we still have all these other billions that we've made off of you and your loved one, or your parent or something is gone, because our drug was bad, but we're paying these billions of dollars, which makes us feel better.
Howard, let me tell you, I'm going to go to Augie in a minute, but before that, I wanted to say that is so true, and again, we always talk about what is the solution, and it breaks down to what your soapbox always is. And the Howard Reynolds soapbox is, you have no excuse not to go out there and vote, but you have to make an intelligent vote.
Don't do this, Egberto.
No, I'm not going to do it now, because you know what? I want to go to Augie. I'm not going to get you on your soapbox. I just wanted to give homage to your soapbox.
Say this from my soapbox here. So Augie, come on in.
Augie, come on.
Hey, Egberto. Besides Merck and all them, what about HMOs? HMOs were created by Republicans, and it was Nixon who did it. The day before he got kicked out of office, a staffer comes to him with a piece of paper for him to sign. And he asks, "What's this piece of paper?" The staffer says, "Well, this is a bill creating HMOs." What's an HMO? That's maintenance integration.
Brother Augie, I'm glad that you brought that up, because yesterday Van Beber, one of the things he said is, Egberto, we need to cover. I think he called. I don't remember if he said insurance or HMO, but whatever the case is, Medicare. That's what Van Beber said yesterday. He said we should be covering that as well, and I said we have, but we also will continue, and we're going to do it, and that includes HMOs, brother. Continue, Augie.
Yeah. Well, and Nixon asked the staffer, how does it make its money? The staffer replied, it makes its money by denying their customer service. And Nixon said, denying their customer service and it makes money? Yeah, I'm all for it. And he signed it. And up to that point, doctors and hospitals, uh, to be in the medical field was to be a service field. But after he signed that form, it became for profit. And when I moved here to Houston in '88, if you look in the business section at Christmas time, every Christmas, on the front pages of the local papers, they were telling how much bonuses they paid their service reps at the HMOs for denying people service that they needed. And there was hundreds of thousands of dollars. And this is money that they were paying the reps to deny people money. And but then when it became noticed, all of a sudden, a few years later, they stopped putting that on the front pages of the paper because they were cheating the American public.
It's amazing, Augie, the evil that these corporations can do, and that we sit down with a certain amount of reverence and respect for their executives. It's something that I'm hoping with these conversations, including with what you're bringing up, what all of us here bring up, that we work with the psyche of others to say, no, you can take control, as Howard would say. Go ahead, Augie.
Yeah, and the reason we know this happened is Nixon bugged the White House. So this conversation was recorded, and in fact, it was played on KPFT years ago on some other show. And when I first moved to Houston, my doctor, primary care doctor, was a Canadian, and he was pissed off with HMOs because HMOs tell a doctor what he can charge and what he can and can't do. And he told me in Canada, doctors are trained differently than here in America. And he got so pissed off after 3 years and dealing with HMOs, he went back to Canada.
Augie, I want to interrupt you for this because I interviewed a Canadian at Netroots Nation, which I'm going to Chicago on the 13th to go ahead and interview a whole lot of these folks again in the progressive space. But again, and that is what he said. He said the Canadian mindset is different than the American mindset. The Canadian mindset is whenever there is a health problem, right, they never think money. If they have a health issue, they never think money. They have a card. They know that they go to their primary care person who then redirects them to wherever they need to go. This stuff about waiting periods and all of that we like to harp on the Canadian system. We have a waiting period here for those people who have normal insurance. It's people who have great premium insurance. They don't do the waiting, but most Americans that have health care, they actually have to call in and make an appointment with a specialist that may be a month or 2 months out. So it's a lie just like I told about but the misinformation with the electric cars that I started the show with earlier today. It's the same thing that goes on in healthcare. So Augie, if you have anything else quick to say, let me hear it, and then we're gonna move on with the other subject on Social Security. I made a tape of that one, but I won't be able to play it. But I need to say a few words on it. Go ahead, Augie.
Yeah. Well, besides waiting periods, they also give you a lot of tests that you have to take, and then they have to look at those tests, and that's more waiting for you too.
Right.
I had a hernia operation one time. Luckily, I was in the union and I had a good medical plan. And right behind me is an executive, and he's got a hernia too. And so the nurse tells me, "Okay, let's go in the back, get ready." And the guy behind me, the executive in his business suit, he's ready to go in there. And when the nurse stops him, and the nurse says, "Oh, here's your insurance company. It says you need to pay for anesthesiologist several $1,000s before we can take you in there." And it says several $1,000s. I told him months ago with my insurance company that I was coming in for hernia. They never told me I had to pay extra, and said, "Yep, if you want the hernia, us to treat you for that, you're gonna have to pay $1,000 right now."
Amazing.
That's our the most.
Thank you very much, Brother Augie. As usual, thank you for calling in. Thank you for listening. Thank you for letting folks know we exist, sir. And thank you for your support for Politics Done Right and other programs at KPFT.
Yeah, thank you for your breath of fresh air, man. Like I tell you.
All right, folks. Thank you, my brother. Love you. Let's move on. All right. Anyway, folks, uh, we can if you have any questions or want to talk about this or want me to carry particular subjects, remember you can send me an email at kpft@politicsdoneright.com. kpft@politicsdoneright.com, and we can go ahead and tell me what you want, complain, do whatever you want. Because again, the whole gist of this program is to interact with you. 713-526-5738. 713-526-5738. Extension number 2. Extension number 2. All right. I only got a little bit of time. Let me do this real quickly. Look, the yesterday, 175 Republicans. Remember, there are only 218 total, I guess, or 220, I think. I don't remember the amount of Republicans in the House of Representatives. 175 of them came out with a paper yesterday talking about increasing the Social Security age to 69. In other words, just call it 70, but 69 is the number they gave, right? And they want to privatize Medicare, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when you go to vote, as Howard would tell you, it matters. Because here's the deal. Our concern right now is that, the Americans have already shown the proclivity to vote for ineptitude. We've had Donald Trump as president. So we have showed the ability to have made grave mistakes that harm us all. It can happen again. And I want to postulate something. If something goes wrong that causes the election of Donald Trump again, it also likely means a flip in the Senate. It also likely means a House getting larger Republican majorities. And these things that they tell you they want to do, increase your retirement age to 69, force Medicare to behave exactly like private insurance, which means, as Augie just talked about, deny you coverage and to make a profit for the many, cause drug companies to charge whatever they can for drugs, and if you don't pay it so much, you die. And I'm not hyperventilating here, people. I am not talking about things that are out of the ordinary. When I wrote in 2016 an article at Daily Kos, Democrats destroyed me because I said Donald Trump was triangulating Hillary Clinton and could actually win the election. I didn't talk about popular vote versus electoral college. I just said he was positioning himself in such a manner that he could become president of the United States with the triangulation that he was doing, with the triangulation that he's doing right now. He's triangulating the Republican Party and the Democratic Party right now with the policies that he's throwing out there and the crazy talk that he's having. He could win again. He could win again. That is why it is so important for us to inform. That is why it's so important for us to go out there and vote. That is why it's so important for us to not take anything for granted. Punto y final. We shouldn't be taking anything for granted, because this paper that they released yesterday, Republicans released yesterday, says that their intent is to turn this country into a profit-based system. And if you can play, you can play. If you can't play, which is most of us, remember, 56% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Under Trump, it was 70-something% living paycheck to paycheck. What was the difference? The social programs that became plausible, not plausible, that's the wrong word, but became okay under President Biden. We have a lot of work to do. The thing about it is that we are still in control. We are still in control. The question is, Will you remain in control? Will you forget about your ideological hang-ups? Will you forget that you hate Democrats? Will you forget that you hate Republicans? Will you forget that you hate black people? Will you forget that you hate brown people? Will you forget that you hate white people? Will you forget that you hate people that you shouldn't hate? Will you forget that all of us are in the same boat? Will you remember, or will you acknowledge that all of us are in the same boat? And in such acknowledgement, realize that the enemy is actually those who control the purse, those who control your life through your insurance, through your all these things that you have to pay, but not by choice, but by demand. Will you look at where the problem really lies and not allow them to tell you what the problem really is? You know why I tell everybody I love them? You know why I call everybody brothers and sisters? Let me tell you why. I can't hurt my brother. I can't hurt my sister. I can't. I can't. But they want you to think that we are not brothers and sisters, man. We're all these different we are these different identities. Yeah, I want us to remember we're different identities, but a salsa coexists. A salsa is very nice tasting, right? So folks, let's wake up. Let's wake up. In 15 seconds, Howard and Brother Van Bebeck, give me some closers here real quick.
We're going to have a great day ahead, Egberto. We've got Democracy Now! Coming up. We've got You Talk. Then the lovely Susan Darrow will come in and entertain us. It's going to be a good day on KPFT. Now over to you, Jack.
Well, when you were talking, I was thinking, how convenient it is that they want to change the age of retirement to 69. For working class people, the life expectancy is getting down to around 65. So it seems like they just want to work you up till you
and don't pay out
and then let you die instead of paying benefits.
You're absolutely right, and I need to give a closer before Howard throw me off the air. So let me just say this real quickly, guys. Please, 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 let's listen to what our people know. Go out there and vote. Vote progressive. Vote for folks you know are going to make things happen for you. Vote the right way. My name is Egberto Willis. This is Politics Done Right, and you guys know how I end this, baby. I am